Magari non per cuore. Guten Rabbi Blau.
Testing. Testing, testing. If someone's on the other end, if they hear, please let me know if this works.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this very special birthday celebration and an evening Farbrengen, reflecting and celebrating Oleh Torah's 70th Yom Holedes. For those in the Farbrengen that are old enough to remember the birthday campaign of Tafshim Memches, there were big ads that were taken out in newspapers when the Rebbe made Mifsa Yom Holedes, Lekavid Chafei Adar of Tafshim Memches. There were big ads that were taken out in the newspapers, in the New York Times, and the ad read, "Birthdays matter. A birthday matters. Why do birthdays matter? What is so special about a day of birth?" So it's interesting when the Chassidim were explaining it, in the beginning, they just wrote it's a very special day. And for a Chassid, it's very clear it's a special day because the Rebbe said that we make a birthday celebration. But the Rebbe actually added, B'chsav Yad Kodshe, when they gave it into the Rebbe wrote in these words, "The Geburt bringt sein Metzias." The Geburt is the day that it brings an entity into existence. Not even an entity. It brings something into an entity and in existence, right? It isn't an entity before it's born. Und der Riber, and therefore, it's a Glicklicher Tag. So, obviously, when the Rebbe was making the campaign of Birthdays Matter, the Rebbe was referring to a birthday of a person that's born. And the idea is that even though at the moment of birth, we don't know yet the story of the child, the moment of birth, we don't see the whole picture. It's actually a time where the child is so vulnerable and so incapable of taking care of itself, yet that's the moment we celebrate because that's the moment it went from the child being an idea, an extension of the mother, ubar yerechimai, to the child becoming a metzias, capable of an avodah. So the same idea, or similarly at least we should say, applies to the idea of a meisid being born, an anniversary. And we find that the Rebbe made a big deal about many anniversaries, 2 days, and foundings of projects. When we have 70 years since the founding of Oleh Torah, which Oleh Torah was funded and founded by the Rebbe. In the beginning, it wasn't so known how much the Rebbe's involvement in Oleh Torah was. It was thought to just be an inspiration of Reb Michal Teitelbaum, based on the Rebbe's Farbrengens. In other words, everyone knew the Rebbe was passionate about Chinuch Ataras HaKodesh. But no one realized that Reb Michal was mamish doing exactly what the Rebbe wanted. And the stories about how Oleh Torah started and how it grew into a meisid and how the Rebbe funded it personally in the early years is perhaps for another Farbrengen. But tonight, as we celebrate the birthday, a birthday is a day of reflection. So Oleh Torah's birthday is not just about Oleh Torah. Oleh Torah is the Rebbe's meisid chinuch, where the Rebbe used it to shape the chinuch of Deir HaShvi'im. And therefore tonight we invited 7 alumni of Oleh Torah who are leaders in their communities, in the schools that they've either founded or they're the principals, the leading chinuch figure for their yeshivas. And we would like to take the night, the Farbrengen, to actually hear from each person a reflection of chinuch, a yisoid in chinuch, a yisoid of the Rebbe's Torah. And we have the great honor tonight of starting with someone that I had the schus to know him in many capacities. I actually was a Talmud of Rabbi Greenbaum before he became the Menal of LA. He taught him a Sifta Oleh Torah, and we had a wonderful year learning by him. And then the rest, as they say, is history, where took LA, this yeshiva prospers and continues to prosper under him. And Rabbi Greenbaum serves as a mentor to many heads of schools and mechanchim in bringing the ideas of chinuch into practical translations and navigating it through from vision to mission to tachlis. So it is my honor to introduce Rabbi Greenbaum as the opening speaker of tonight's 7 Voices of Chinuch. Rabbi Greenbaum.
Good evening. And be'etzem mazel tov to us all. Each and every one of us alumni of Al Torah who were zeicha to receive
Okay.
Right. Yashakayach Rabbi Blau for the introduction. Good evening to everybody. And the Reishis call is be'etzem mazel tov to each and every one of us. Each and every one of us, Talmidim of Al Torah. I don't think that it's a gather of an alumni, merely alumni, as Amol given, a Talmud in Al Torah. There's something about it that stays with you in the kishkis, in the blood, and certainly each and every one of us are zeicha to on a day that we celebrate this yastus of Al Torah. The brachas and the hamshachas are nimshach each and every one of us. So it's certainly worthy of a mazel tov each and every one of us, and yashakayach to the anhola of Al Torah for inviting myself, amongst the other chashuva panelists, to participate in tonight's Fabrengen. I'd like to focus on 2 areas, perhaps shaped by experiences that I had in the yeshiva, particularly in the year of Tashim Mem Tes, sitting by Rabbi Twersky, and highlight those 2 areas this evening. If at all times, B'chlal, we understood that we, as individuals, and Kal v'chomer, our children, are affected by our surroundings, by their surroundings, we certainly live now in a time where children are hypersensitive to the environment which surrounds them. And it has the practical effect. Unfortunately, you see a lot of anxiety and things like that in our times, which you never saw by younger children in the past. So I thought that although there are many more areas, but I want to highlight 2 areas where we as parents and as mechanchim, so to speak, set the temperature in our homes and impact the chinuch of our children, and then leave the other areas to our other chashva presenters. I heard 2-3 years ago, someone shared with me, and I hope that this is accurate, and I'll say it with that disclaimer, that if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Weg, shliach in Tulsa, Oklahoma, told over that before going out on shlichus, he was told by Rabbi Chadakov a line in regards to shlichus. As Eier shlichus is zu sein a Dugme Chaya von der Simche von Yiddishkeit. There's nothing to talk about that as parents and then as mechanchim. The raising of our children is our shlichus. So by extension, this line applies to each and every one of us. Unsere shlichus ist zu sein a Dugme Chaya von der Simche von Yiddishkeit. Having simcha around all matters of kedusha, matters of Yiddishkeit in the home, displaying geschmack, is a yesoid in ensuring that our children are going to have a joyous experience with their Yiddishkeit, with their Darkei Chassidus. The Welt tells a word, a maisa, anecdote. It's told over b'shem different Gedolei Yisrael. I heard it b'shem Ramesha Feinstein, that someone said, he once said that being a Rosh Hashiva in the Lower East Side in the early years in America, We all know that there were many immigrants that came to America in the early years, and even if they themselves held on to their Yiddishkeit, unfortunately, their children didn't necessarily stay as firm or as frum. And the way the story is told is that he said the difference was in regards to the parent. Each one of these individuals, they themselves may have been tremendously frum, and they may have had Mesiras Nefesh for Shmiras Shabbos, for example. But the question was, what did they bring home when they had that Mesiras Nefesh? Some of them came home on a Friday and they were fired from their jobs for being told that they have to work on Shabbos, and they said, no, we're not going to work on Shabbos. So they were fired from their jobs. And they came home krechzing and moaning, oi, noch avach, another job lost, another thing because of Shmiras Shabbos. They did it. They were Shema Shabbos. They had Mesiras Nefesh. But they came home with a krechts about it. Others came home, the same experience. Aber what they told their families was, maybe we don't have a job. Come, let's get together and bring the joy of Shabbos. And he said that's the difference between those that held on to it and their children went ahead and continued because they experienced a geschmack and a simcha in all matters related to Yiddishkeit and all matters related to Torah. So das is sicher our shlichus, our raising of our children is certainly our shlichus. And it's certain that unsere shlichus is a dugma chaya from the simcha from Yiddishkeit for our children and for our talmidim. We know the importance of having a shochem toiv and the impact lehepach. There's nothing to talk about that we are our children's most important and most active shchenim, and certainly can stand to be their shchenim toivim, and the impact that that has. The geschmack and the simcha in Yiddishkeit is fundamental. Along those same lines is the idea of positivity around chinuch. That about the positive, having a positive approach in regards to discipline, that's not the nekuda that I want to focus on. That's certainly an important inyan, certainly the derech of our times, as expressed by the Rebbe on various occasions, including Lag Ba'omer, Tav Shamnun, Chadayma, but it's a topic and a talk in its own right. Suffice it to say, the word of the Fidik Rebbe, he says that the name used for the moisid that educates children in the elementary age, traditionally we use the name Cheder. The Fidik Rebbe says, as Cheder is a Rosh Tevis, Chesed, Din, Rachamim. And he says that it's a Dover HaPoshet that each one of these kavim are necessary. It's necessary to employ sometimes Din, Abyssal Sumera, etc. But the Yisoidus has to certainly start with the Ches, has to start with Chesed. Or the word from the Sfasamis, the word on the Eibusher says, Lagabi Avram Avinu ki yadaitiv, Lamana sheyitzavez, bonav beis of acharav, he says, ki yadaitiv, Rashi says, is Lashon Chiba, the Eibusher loves Avram because he educates his children. Sfasamis says that the word yadaitiv is an active word. It's not just that he loves Avram. Yadaitiv, ich hab ihm geschenkt mit der Schenk von Liebschaft. I gifted him with the gift of love, Lamana sheyitzaveh, so that he should be able to educate his children, because without the yisoid of positivity, of love, that's not going to work. So that's not the nekuda I'm referring to. I'm referring to positive talk in regards to chinuch matters at home. When we speak at our Shabbos table, when we speak beinish li'ishtay and the children are around and we don't even realize that they're always around, the mood around chinuch at home, if it's a positive one, is going to uplift our children and their chinuch experience. If everything is nish genug and nish gut and this does take nicht, then it's going to schlep them down as well. There was a Yid in London, a chassid, Freddie Hager. He tells over a Maisa that when he was experiencing a difficult time in Parnassa, he was a diamond seicher, and the market for diamonds was not doing well, and the Parnassa was schwer, and he found himself to be in a very difficult maimed matzav beruach. And he wrote to the Rebbe about it, maybe it was a yechidus, and the Rebbe said to him, you need to surround yourself around more positive people. And he says, Taka, when he came back to London afterwards, he met a particular individual, a guy called William Goldberg. He was a flamboyant type of diamond merchant, and he connected with him. He says this connection with this person who was upbeat, positive spirited, positive mood, changed everything in his life, and Taka brought brachas into his life, placing chinuch, placing mechanchim, moistes chinuch in the most positive of perspectives will only serve to uplift our children and their chinuch experience. Ka'amur, when I started, I think that this is a lot of the experiences. I'm thinking back to particularly Tavshin Mem Tes, a year in which I experienced a year full of warmkeit, upliftment, geschmack, and simcha. It's true by many of the mechanchim and malamdim and menalim in Al Torah. One that year particularly stands out in my personal life, and I give gratitude to Rabbi Tursky and to all the mechanchim and to all the menalim that I was able to learn from over the course of the years in Al Torah, who've helped shape and mold myself, and hopefully my children, grandchildren, talmidim, l'deidah deidas. The Eibusha should give them all tremendous brachas and keiches, larichas yamim v'shonim tevis, gesundheit and freiligkeit, and they should be zeicher to have much nachas from all of us. L'chaim l'vracha.
Thank you, Rabbi Greenbaum. Thank you, Rabbi Greenbaum, for the inspirational and very meaningful message, a message that you live by, that you live with, a message that you inspired many with. And if I can add, is that this year in Al Torah and in many circles, a big talk around the Rebbe's letters, and we've been putting a big emphasis on looking back at a lot of the Rebbe's letters to Al Torah, and in each letter for each year's dinner, besides the Rebbe's brachas that he would give to Al Torah and to the supporters and friends of Al Torah, or the way the Rebbe would call it, the shtitzers from Al Torah, the Rebbe always put in a chinuch message that he was advancing through these letters that were read by the dinner. And on multiple years, the Rebbe talks about the simcha and the simcha shel mitzvah that needs to be an integral part of our chinuch. I'll just read one small paragraph from a letter in Tafshin Lamed Gimel, where the Rebbe, it would say it's a letter of a Shemitah year, and the Rebbe talks about the uniqueness of the mitzvah and the message of the mitzvah. But the Rebbe continues, and I'll read one paragraph. Der does get zugang zu Torah mitzvahs. This approach to Torah mitzvahs is eingepflanzt werden jüdische Kinder von der frühesten Jung an, has to be implanted into our children from the youngest age. Und das ist die Aufgabe von der Moiset Chinuch Al Torah. This is the mandate of the Moiset of Al Torah, the Rebbe underlines, zu erziehen jüdische Kinder in Torah b'yirah shamayim, and here's the Rebbe adds, und simcha shel mitzvah. It should be done with joy. And there's many letters where the Rebbe elaborates this point further in Einklang mit der Oben Gesagte, and then the Rebbe adds his personal certification and says, und is matzliach in them. Al Torah is matzliach in this nekuda to transmit not just the Yiddishkeit, but also the simcha shel mitzvah, the joy and pride around our Yiddishkeit. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce the next voice of tonight, Rabbi Mendel Yuzevich. He's a close friend. We went through yeshiva together, and Rabbi Mendel Yuzevich today serves as the Menahel of Menachem, which is another Moiset Chinuch Altaras HaKodesh right here in Crown Heights. And Rabbi Mendel is going to fabring and talk about what does Taras HaKodesh mean and how it plays out in our life, in Shlichus, and its connection to Lechatchila Riber. Rabbi Mendel, please unmute yourself.
L'chaim, l'chaim. It's a special schos to join in such a farbrengen. Tremendous to celebrate this tremendous milestone of 70 years of chinuch in the Rebbe's gang, in a gift that the Rebbe gave us, a highway in chinuch. The Rebbe suggested, and this is by me. So I'm going to share a little bit of thought that I believe if each one of us parents can impart with their children, you'll be giving them a gift that's immeasurable. It's an indispensable matana you can give your child, and it's in broad daylight. I would say even more than that. It's a gift you already gave, and you just need to help him unwrap it. The Rebbe in the founding Sikha, where the Rebbe introduced the concept of Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, that he would rather have children that the Rebbe says they can't aufheben Ashuch Berstel doesn't bother me. They go against the grain of Derech HaTeva and Derech HaOlam and Hanachas HaOlam. When we I imagine for a moment you have the possibility, the schus, to give your child a gift, to give him wings, to give him the feeling that there's sky's the limit, that there's nothing that can inhibit him. And you already took that step by enrolling him in Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh. You demonstrated that you're ready to walk the path that the Rebbe says is grounded and based on true bitachon. That if Reishis Arisosechem, when he's a child, his mind is dedicated completely and solely to Limudei Kodesh, dedicated to the Eibishter. The Eibishter will provide for him. That is a tremendous, tremendous empowerment if you celebrate it. And that's why I'm saying this gift you have already given to your child because you've taken the steps. And the truth is, this is for obviously Ali Torah. This is a tremendous celebration of 70 years being the Mala, the Rebbe's Ratzon and the Rebbe's Shlichus, and a tremendous birthday. A Yom Uledes, as the Rebbe Mamer celebrates. We know Tezvavel, the Rebbe wanted to see Chadaram. It's a birthday of a Moisid, and it's a celebration day for the entire world of Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh. But anyone that learns in the Rebbe's Moistis, when you enrolled your child, you made a tremendous statement, and sometimes you underestimate that statement you made and that gift that you gave your child. And now we're for bringing together on such a day, it's a time to stop, rethink, and recognize it. And the reason why it's important is because the more you verbalize it, the more he unpacks this gift that you've given. You've Pasha walked the walk of giving him the Rebbe's glasses. And now just explain to him what this means. When I'll share a short story. My Zayda Reb Moshe Rubin Al Vashalom used to chazer the following Maisa. It's an interesting story. Try to keep this whole thing within 7 minutes. And there was once a person comes to his friend and tells him, listen, a shushkit in his ear, I have counterfeit money. And I'm ready to do a deal with you. I'll give it to you at a bargain. He gives him a few $100s. And he tells him, go test if this money works. So the guy goes to the bank and he goes to the store and he goes to it's Al and Nemendes. They don't blink an eye. They don't flinch. Everyone takes it. Givaldik. He comes back to him. He says, it's amazing. I bought things. I sold things. Everything worked. The bank took. So he says, okay, now let me try it again. And he gives him 3K. And now we're dating with $3,000 and he's buying and everyone's taking and he's getting more and more confident. Then he comes back to him at the end of the week and he tells him, listen, I'm in. So he tells him, okay, let's make a deal. Get me $10,000. I'll give you in counterfeit money, $30,000. Your mom is making 2/3. Zokter, Gewaldik, he does that and he comes back. The guy gives him Pashat 10K and he gives him $30,000 and he's using it and he's living the day. Comes back to him. He says, I want more. He says, listen, I don't have time for this back and forth with small money. I'm dealing with much bigger sums. Get me $500,000. I'll give you $2 million. And we'll call it a deal. Kitzer, he goes, he borrows from all his friends, and he comes the right time, the right place with $500,000 in a suitcase, gives it over. The person gives him 2 suitcases back. Counterfeit money, $2 million, and he's mamish made the deal of his life. He's going to pay back his friends. But he's walking, and he's super self-conscious. All of a sudden, he starts feeling there's steps behind him, and he's super sensitive. He doesn't know, So he starts walking quicker, and then he starts feeling that these steps are getting quicker and following him. But he starts running, and they catch him, hold him down. These are 2 officers, 2 policemen, and give us the suitcases. This is counterfeit money. We know. We looked into this. Kitzer, he gives them the suitcases, and now he's pushed. His brain is racing, his heart is pumping. He's trying to figure out this is not a small crime, it's a huge crime. This federal, how does he get out of this? But Kitzer, he's realizing they're taking him to the precinct, that there's space every turn. There's a little bit of so to speak leeway. So he knows these streets well. This is his community. He takes a one turn. He makes a vayivrach. They chase him. He goes through alleyway. He got away. And he sighs a sigh of relief. A kapara the 500 for the $500,000. At least I'll pay back the chayvus over a few years, but I'll see the light of day. That's the end of the story. What's the Russian cap? Everything here was real. The truth is, the guy came to him lechatchila with $3,000 or $200. They were all real money. And when he gave him $2 million, it was also real money. The only fake part of the story were these two policemen. He built him up till he got him $500,000, and then he see two people dressed like policemen chopped him, and he gave back the money, and that's it. So now he lost the money. So my Zayda used to say Azay, and I think this applies to all of us that learned Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, all of our dear parents that have your children in Alei Torah and Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, and are mischanach in the ruach of the Rebbe's Chiddush and the Rebbe's highway in Chinuch, that we all daven, mothers daven at the licht, and fathers daven that their child, he gets Chinuch, he's swimming in a world of the Rebbe's perspective, and then he goes out to the world. And then the first thing is the world starts saying, I'm the boss. We daven, he doesn't give out the suitcases. If he would have believed, this guy would have believed for 1 second that it was real money, he would never give up the suitcases. Elamai, he didn't have a hava minute, this is real money. And you should know that's the story of our life. We get chinuch, we're mechanech our children, that the real tafkid of this world, the real emes and the real value is basi legani. It's the Eibishter coming, this is the Eibishter's garden, and a mitzvah is the real reichkeit. And when you ask a yid what he does for a living, really the hierarchy should go by how many hours he davens, and how many mitzvahs he does, and chesed, and a hergish and avodas Hashem, and a geschmack and a nigin, and a chush and a chsiddush maisa. Elamai, when you go out to the world says, I'm the boss, you're welcome to my territory. And we daven that the children should never give up these suitcases. They should know this is real currency. And no, the emes is what we learned in Cheder, what we learned in Yeshiva, what we learned in Alei Torah, what we learned in the Rebbe's perspective, in the Rebbe's world on Jam. And you should know, by you reminding not only reminding our child, celebrating this decision that you made to put your child in the Rebbe's Amoisid, the Amoisid the Rebbe saying in the Sienu, Amoisid that teaches Al Taras HaKodesh, you walk the walk of relying on the Eibishter, and your Pasha displaying to your child, this is what I believe, not only what I believe, the way I'm walking blindly on the Rebbe's perspective. I don't give you what every Jonathan and Harry believe, that this is what you need to succeed in life, and have them paper, as the Rebbe described many times, and all the Hanachas Ha'olam the Rebbe says is like, I'm not getting into a whole myself, Yedei Ha'olam Miskav and Limrid, but he knows we don't shy away from the world, we don't live in a shtetl, and we know that Yedei Ha'olam Miskav and Limrid, but it's all, a shliach comes to a city, it's all incorporated. So it's all, he's not pshat, he's making jokes about politics because he wants to fit in. He wants them to fit into his vision. That's Yedei Ha'olam Miskav and Limrid, but. And this is a gift you already gave your child by enrolling. You just need a chaparine. And today's the day to stop and celebrate this decision you have taken. And mitoch simcha, remind your child. And I hope we can see this again, because it's something I think about continuously. And as a gift, I remind the parents of my moises and all moises should think about this again and again. The tremendous partnership that you have, the tremendous partnership that you came in with the moisid, you gave the shlichus that you had to be mechanech a child, which is the Eibishter's gift to you, and you gave it to a moisid. That's a tremendous vote of confidence and a tremendous mesiras nefesh yourself. Just to finish off, the celebration of 70 years of Alei Torah is not a celebration only of the Rebbe's vision. It's a celebration of chassidim that jumped in and followed through. Reb Michal decided, and it's based on mesiras nefesh of Reb Michal. He heard a sicha and decided to make it a reality. And each one of us really is the Reb Michal of your house. You decided to choose this chinuch. And the more you celebrate it, the more you verbalize it. I'm so happy you're zoichet to learn in the Rebbe's Amoisid. You're zoichet to learn a Amoisid that teaches only Kodesh. Your head doesn't know from what Yener thinks is chashav, and Yener These are children that I want to add. It's not just L'chatchila Riber and Shlichus, which Baruch Hashem al was Zoicha, and the Rebbe's vision for Chinuch was Zoicha to be Megadol Deir Shvi Chsidim that come into university, and they're not only not mush, but they're the mashpim. It's far beyond that. Rabbi Yisrael Friedman was a wilde Goin. It's l'chatchila riber and Torah. There's no limits. Such a child will never give up the suitcases. As we know, all my chaverim that we learn together in Alei Torah. There's a certain breitkeit and that there's not the Weltzak, no mechtesa. That's an edler sprach. Why? Because our parents took that step, and we are part of that step. We're the Reb Michal to step in, to appreciate that chinuch, to celebrate that chinuch, and are also celebrating the mechanechim that do this Mesiras Nefesh and apply themselves to further this. So l'chaim, 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 let us give that pride, that Gaon Yaakov, in the Rebbe's Mahalach and in the chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, and keep our homes al Taras HaKodesh. It's not only what you don't do, it's what you do. Everything is permeated and saturated with Kedusha and with this kasha. So l'chaim, 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 should be a shnas atzlacha and l'mayla ben Amashur with the Rebbe's brachas as all the letters. Mitech Shleimus with this galus of the Rebbe take from Yad Mamish. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim Reb Mendel, thank you. That was beautiful. I'll add to your point, just one nekuda. Bechlal in l'chatchila riber, the Rebbe always attributed it to the Rebbe Marash, and l'chatchila riber, the Rebbe Marash's thing. When you do a search engine to find how many times can you find l'chatchila riber and Torah Shmuel and Sefer Meimarim, you're gonna have to work very hard to find even one result. The Rebbe, obviously it is the Rebbe Marash's avort, but the Rebbe took l'chatchila riber and made it the derech of Deir HaShvi. Deir HaShvi's nekuda is to live by the Rebbe Marash's principle of l'chatchila riber. And by that same token, the way you linked l'chatchila riber with Taras HaKodesh as well is a mandate of Deir HaShvi. It's not something that's unique to Alei Torah. It's not something that's unique to any one Meisid. It's the Rebbe's vision for all Meistis. And you find in many letters of the Rebbe where the Rebbe wrote to the Meistis and called Meistis, even with certain general studies, also Taras HaKodesh. Because there were levels in Kedusha. You have in the Beis HaMikdash that there are the 10 levels of Kedusha. There's a Kedusha of Yerushalayim, and there's the Kedusha of Harabayis. So in a letter of Tafshin Yud Ches, which is actually the first letter that the Rebbe wrote that we have to Alei Torah, was actually written to the ladies' auxiliary of Alei Torah. The Rebbe encourages them, and the Rebbe says this Lashon. It's a very unique Lashon. The wichtige Arbeit von Verstärken Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh bechlal, generally strengthening Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, und in die Rahmen von Alei Torah speziell. Rahmen in translating is like a frame. So there's a general mandate, which is for all. What the Rebbe wants from every Meisid is Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh. And then there's a framework. Each Meisid finds its voice and its way, how it can find application to this vision of Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh, to the vision of l'chatchila riber. And there's the framework, the way l'chatchila riber and Taras HaKodesh is experienced and lived in Alei Torah. And there's a framework, the way it's going to apply to every Meisid of the Rebbe, and each one is a Meisid al Taras HaKodesh. Thank you for your words. It is my pleasure now to go over to another dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Lamatasov, who is an inspiration to many people. Where he came, there's for many of us, we joined the Meisid, started somewhere, we came on, tried contributing in any way that we can to improve. But Arla is a chinuch entrepreneur, where he went to Florida and he started from scratch. And in a very short story, in a very short amount of years, not 70 years, barely 7 years, you have a Meisid l'Shem l'Seferes, Cheder Chabad in Florida, a Meisid al Taras HaKodesh, together with the other Meisidis al Taras HaKodesh. So without further ado, Rabbi Arla is going to address us about looking at chinuch from a long-term perspective and not just looking for the instant, expecting instant results. Rabbi Arla b'chavod gadol.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Yeshakayach Rebendel and Mazel Tov to everyone for the for Alei Torah. I'm a proud Alei Torahnik. I learned my whole elementary and the Sifta and Alei Torah, and I have mamish very good memories from all the different rebbes. I'm not going to highlight anyone specific, but we really had very special good years in Alei Torah with the menalim and the teachers and everything. And right now, it's very nice to see how Alei Torah is continuing to grow and adding, and it's mamish it's a light for all the other meistis and the Bavitch and maybe the whole world. It's incredible how Alei Torah is advancing in such an amazing way. And a big ashakayach to Rabbi Blau and Rabbi Lustig for their incredible leadership and how they're really moving Alei Torah forward and doing so much for all the kinderlach. So I'll start with a story that Amasa said. It's a longer story. I'll say it bekitzer, but I know this person. I know this younger man. He was when he was a child. He was in a family of a very nice, very good regular family with good the boys and the girls. Everyone did well in the family, and he was having a very hard time in school and in the family. And he was sent out of school. He had to switch schools. He was sent out mid-year with alle Schwierigkeiten. I spoke to his mechanchim. They were having a very hard time with him, and at home as well. All these the mices that happened are mices for the book of all the different things that went on in class and which schools he went to. And then he went to camp. The challenges in camp. He couldn't go to camp, and needless to say, everyone was very worried about what's going to be with him. And the whole family was doing so well, and here you have one boy that mamish had a very hard time. His teachers had a hard time. Everyone had a hard time. It turned out that at one point, in the middle of the yeshiva age, I think at the end of Mesivta or beginning of Zal, there was a switch that turned, and mitamal, he became this chassidische edele boy, mamish, a geschmacke bacher, kochen sich in learning, kochen sich in he behaved derech eretz, everything, First it was an extreme, like ultra chassidish mamish, even a little maybe too much, but then things went well, and he was a counselor in camp, mamish, a good bacher, a edele bacher, chassidische bacher. He got married, married the Kashidach, he's on Shlichus now, a beautiful family. And I was talking to one of his mechanchim once, and they said, this is a story of Chinuch. All of us often, if you're in Chinuch, then you obviously had a child, there's a challenge, Segeitnish. And the stam in every family, there's also sometimes you have a lot of families have children you're struggling with, and we get sometimes lost, and we're worried what's going to be, and it's how you talk, it's not working. You talk to the child, you speak to the boy, you speak to the girl, you say this, you do this, you try with the old strategies to get and we're all worried what's going to be, and we think that there's no results. We think that we're doing things that's not helping because we're looking at what's right now. It didn't work, and you get all. It's mamish, the end of the world. The pasha doesn't work. I spoke to him. This happened. That happened. And you think the world's going to end. But so many times these students, the children or our kids, really every word we tell them they listen to. Everything we share they listen to. They hear what we're saying, and they don't have to respond right away. It's not about the instant response. We have to think about what's going to be later down the line. And each one of us, if you're in chinuch, you can think about children who we were so worried about, and they're doing so well later. And by the way, sometimes it's the other way. There are some children who are easy to deal with, and it's very easy for a classroom. It's easy in the family. They follow all the rules, and later we see Nebach that when they get older, it's not so easy and it's not so pashut. So we can't get stuck in focusing on the problems that are right now. We have to look at the bigger picture and see the future. And when you look at the future, we all will deal with kids different because we always want that instant result. You want a functional home, you want a functional classroom. I don't like the words functional and dysfunctional. Everyone throws the word dysfunctional, be garnished. But you want a classroom to run well. You want a school to run well. Was taste a good terminal, everything's cracking, als gate, a good teacher, you walk into the classroom, als is Masuda, you go into a house, everyone's behaving so nicely, especially whenever there's guests. We have to show that it's a shena shtub and everything's cracking and everything's so beautiful. And we have this image, this instant thing. We want everything to work, and if it doesn't work, we get upset. We yell at the kids. We don't, and we talk to them, and we think there's no results. But really, there's a long-term goal over here. It's not about what's happening today. It's not about what's happening tomorrow. It's what's happening in the future. And the kids, when we're dug mechaya, they see us. When we talk to them, they listen to us. And I think that when you look in the Rebbe's Hayrais always about how to deal with challenges with chinuch, the Rebbe always talks about explain them, tell them. And when you talk to teachers' parents, it's like, obviously I told them, but it doesn't help. Yeah, for the short term, maybe for tomorrow, you're not going to see the results. But in the long term, if you talk to them and you explain them, and even if you think there's no results, it's a long life ahead. And we're in for when you're dealing with chinuch, you're in for the big game for what's going to be at the end. Um, I'll share another var. This happens a lot, but sometimes you have a child who they can be mamash a shveri year in school, and it can be even with the best teacher. A specific child had the best teacher, and the year shveri als garnish gate. It comes the next year with a newer teacher of Slav Dafka, so much such a chush in chinuch, and the child changed and they're doing so well. Why? It's because everything that they put in the year before, the years before, they explain to the child. Sometimes a boy or a girl, they need an opportunity to change. So when it's a new year, it's a chance to change. It didn't change because it was a change this year. It's because everything that you told them, and you spoke to them, and you farbreng with them, and you modeled to them, eventually changes, and eventually they see it. So what we could learn, and definitely it's like Rabbi Blau was saying, it's for our Mosid, it's our 7th year. For it's the 70th year, so it's 7 and 7. But we definitely could learn to not to get chas v'shalom stuck and worried about and get lost, and we get all startled when we have a problem, but to think about the child, think about his future, talk to him in the long run, talk to him about, or him or her, about what things are good. And obviously, the best time to talk to a child is when things are calm, not at the moment. And if I bring with them, talk to them, when there's a problem, you make a macha. Sometimes you think, what does it help to make a macha? It's helpnish. You have to have a consequence. Lav dafka, macha is enough. Eventually they're going to learn and think about the big picture. And there's Bichlal, our schools, sometimes the way it's set up is hard for a lot of the kids. And a lot of kids, they actually have chushim that are not made for school. Chushim that when they're going to get older, they're going to do so well. So we don't have to get stuck in how they're behaving mamish in the classroom and how they're behaving at home. Even though you need a home to run well, you need a classroom to run well, but we should look at the bigger picture and think about kids who that had a hard time in school that did very well later. And sometimes you can think about the opposite also, just to help you understand. And Mirza Hashem, we should work hard and look at the long picture. Now, when you think Al 70 years, it's also you look at the bigger picture. And someone started the first year of Al Torah, they said, Hayitachin, it's Azaz school. The Rebbe pushed everyone, even for the beginning, to go. So we look at the big picture, and Mirza Hashem will have atzlacha with the chinuch of the kids. We'll have atzlacha with our own kids, and atzlacha with kids in the moistis, and we'll be zeichet with the avodas hachinuch, which is the highest avodah, the most important avodah. That will be zeichet rugdum shegedalno, and we'll go with Mashiach in the front with the Taira Kinderlach.
Thank you, Rabbi. Amen. So your topic of, they say it in the lashon of balabatim. I've heard, I'm in it for the long game. There's the short day traders and the ones that are in it for the long, and you find that perspective in many sichos of the Rebbe. But like the theme of tonight is appreciating the seeds that the Rebbe implanted in the way that Rebbe shaped and advanced chinuch through all the Torah, in many letters of the Rebbe talks about the idea of looking at chinuch as a long game. Now, you used an expression about, the end. I don't know. In respect, I'll say, I don't know if there is an end. In other words, when we really think about the long game of chinuch, so in a letter of Tavshin Chafei, the Rebbe writes that therefore, I'm going to read the English translation, which many of them were also edited by the Rebbe. The Rebbe writes, therefore, every effort is justified in the field of chinuch, for what is at stake is the whole future of the student and his lifelong benefit. So we're training ourselves not just to get caught up with the day-to-day, not just to get caught up with passing the year or graduating the Talmud from elementary or passing him on to Mesivta, but to realize his lifelong benefit. We're here for the Toiva of the Talmud, and we're invested in the long game for a lifelong benefit. In a letter of Tafshel Amid Ches, the Rebbe adds a little bit more, and not surprising, we see the Rebbe says, der ganze zukünftige Leben und ledoire doires. Because that's why I said I don't know if there is an end game. There is the Talmud the way he is today. There is the Talmud the way he is this year. There's the Talmud the way he is in our division. But be'emes, we're invested and we have to train ourselves to think in the long, the relationship in the Talmud for a lifelong. And when we impact the Talmud for a lifelong, we're impacting the Talmud to live a rich life, and we're positively impacting generations and generations. This is the Rebbe's cook, and if only we can adapt it, because it's sometimes difficult when we get carried away with the day-to-day. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next voice of chinuch, a tremendous voice, a voice that is heard throughout all the moistis. Reb Mendel Levin is a very special mechanich, a menal. Reb Mendel actually taught over here in Alatorah, besides for learning in Alatorah. And Reb Mendel went on from taking the cheder in Philadelphia from a small, tiny cheder, almost like in a garage, and into a prospering place to the point that Reb Mendel is to blame for the positive phenomena of many Anash moving to Philadelphia, because it's a good cheder to rely on. So Reb Mendel, without further ado, I would like to ask you to share the voice of chinuch.
Thank you, Rabbi Blau. And on the theme of a lifelong impact of chinuch, I think back about myself. Around 20 years ago, I had the zchus to spend a year in Oli Torah, Shir Dalet Zal, and there were a lot of tremendous people who had an impact on me in a very positive way. The Bachrim, the Anhola, and there's one particular person who made an incredible impact on myself and many, many other Talmidim. And of course, that's the esteemed, renowned Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Sor Friedman, Olav Shalom, who, of course, was a tremendous Gaon, Rosh Yeshiva, amazing teacher, Maggid Shir, a Chassidish Yid, a Dugma Chaya, he would fabring, so many amazing things about him. And together with that, there's one thing in addition that stuck with me, was that with all of these milos, and in fact, he was probably 4 times our age, he never carried himself as such. There was never a distance between Rabbi Yisrael and us, the Talmidim. We never felt that he held himself higher, greater, or that there was Rabbi Yisrael, the Rosh Yeshiva on one side, and us, the Talmidim, on the other. And for those of you that remember him, he would walk into Zal with this huge smile on his face, walking from table to the Bachrim, as if he was just one of us. And he would say a good word, maybe even crack a joke, and then we would have the opportunity to learn together with him, one or chavruso, just with him, the Rosh Yeshiva. And I still remember today a compliment he told me in that learning time, and we didn't feel that distance, just that closeness, that being noticed, him being present to us and connected to us. And perhaps it's because of that he was able to have such a tremendous impact on so many Talmidim, and to transmit his knowledge and his Chassidishkeit to so many of us. And when we think about us as parents, us as mechanchim, using that yesod of connecting with our children, using that yesod of noticing our children and being present to them, and as the yesod for their learning. As parents, as mechanchim, we all have things that we hope for our children, aspirations, and an image of what an ideal child would be, whether it's in their chassidishkeit, whether it's in their limud, menschlichkeit, midos, social life, and so on and so forth. And when our children inevitably, at a certain point, don't meet that expectation, whether it's a certain thing they did one day, or whether they're struggling with something, so it's very natural for us as parents or mechanchim to, the knee-jerk reaction would be to perhaps get upset, angry, sad, and sometimes we might even respond in such a way to whatever the child is doing. And that's something that we all work on. We're all human and we all work on that kind of response. And then sometimes when the child is doing something, our own children, a child is doing something that is not the way we want, we we talk to them in an assertive way. We're the parent, they're the child, and we tell them what's expected. We put the boundary in place and we tell them what we want them to do and what they need to do. And of course, that has its place in chinuch. And then there's another way, which perhaps is even more deeper, long-lasting impact, and using what the Rebbe said about chinuch being like lighting the menorah, shetei shal heves olam eleha, that the child himself is transforming. The child himself becomes independent in his skills, and he's not reliant on me, the father, or me, the parent, or the mechanech, because the child himself is transforming. And that happens with, first and foremost, the yesod of connection, of the child feeling noticed, the child feeling heard, the child feeling that we see them and we hear them and we're with them and we're not upset at them. We're here to guide them and to work with them. We're not sitting opposite them, we're sitting next to them or even behind them and moving them forward. And then the mahalach we take is very different. It's one of, instead of me telling the child what I expect of him, it's me helping the child to problem solve in whatever I want him or her to grow in. And just to give an example of this, in as both as a menahel and as a parent, so hopefully it's a little bit relatable. And of course, we could bring about this a whole night. There was a time that a teacher called me for help. A Talmud had, in the classroom in front of everyone, called the teacher out loud and name an inappropriate name. And of course, in a classroom, that doesn't work. And the teacher told me about it, and he asked me for help. And of course, there are times where you have to tell a child that's not appropriate, don't do that, we don't do that, and so on and so forth. But I took a different approach with this Talmud. I waited till the next morning, read Matasov before shared. You don't have to always do it in the moment. And I decided to, number one, connect with the child, and number two, to try to put the child in the driver's seat over here once I have that yesod of the child sees me as his ally and connected with him. So first I asked the child how he was. I complimented him on something that I knew he had done. And the tone in the room was one of working together, not one of menahel telling off student. And then the conversation went into, I'd like to problem solve with you. I'd like to figure out a solution to a challenge. There were no defenses. There was no arguing back. There was no, okay, whatever you say, and yes, sir. And the child was able to think through the problem, share his perspective, take ownership of the problem, and move forward and move past it because there was that yesod of connection, that yesod of presence. He was able to learn from that experience. I'll share another example and similar example, but there's a caveat here, of course, which is that children that are not used to doing this, it's a muscle that has to be worked through and it has to be trained and taught. Another example, as a parent, here in Philadelphia, we have to drive to school. I'm sure some of the panelists here also. And there's a unique phenomena that happens in my car. Not sure that happens to anyone else, and that is that there's some bickering in the car. And the bickering in the car is usually one of a few things. One, which seat the child sits in. Two, what music or story tape is played in the car. And three is that a child moved his foot into the 3 inches of the invisible line between the chairs. And Kachava one day happened in my car. I come in the car and they're already fighting. And I got a report that one of my children hit another child. I woke up that morning already in a little off, and also happens sometimes. We wake up in a bad mood and things are going on, and life is busy and there's so much happening. And and so my response to the child was for sure not the way I wanted it to be. My tone of voice, the way I spoke to him, and all that was way off. And I told the child to leave the car so I could talk to him in a not nice way. And the child ignored me. And when you're in that mode of upset and that distance and that opposite, you usually dig yourself deeper until you chapzech that not a good idea. So I let it go. And for then. And then as the car ride went on and we're driving quite a while, and I turned to my children and I said, we need to address what happened, and I will in Mirza Hashem. But I want to apologize for the way I spoke. That was not the way I wanted to talk to you. And then I waited till the drive home, and then I just had this child with me. And I began a conversation with him about how the day at school went. It was connecting. It was looking at the child. It was noticing the child. And with a smile, with a laugh, with a good word. And the child's with me now. And then once you have that yesod, that connection, then I move to phase 2, which is I want to problem solve with you. Something happened before. And suddenly the response was one of willingness, one of working with me, one of coming up with a solution for what had happened in the car before. And the child's mind worked. I was able to help with some ideas, and we came up with a resolution that actually worked. So when I think about, the impact that Rabbi Yisrael had on me till today, and the teachers that I'm sure everyone who's listening had, the ones that were able to notice you, were able to connect with you, were able to sit next to you, and the impact that they had on you and on us to be able to bring our children to the place that we want them to be, to Ru'u Gedolim Shegidalnu, to be Emes Chassidische Yidden, good people, Ahavas Yisrael, and so on. And just to conclude, Rabbi Greenbaum quoted the Sikha of Lag BaOmer Tafshin Nun, and the quote from there, at least from the non-Muga Sikha, the way it's in Teres Menachem in Isvaduyis, is Kfi sheroim b'muchash shechinuch mitech ava gluya matzliach yoser michinuch mitech yira v'fachad. As we see clearly, that chinuch which comes out of overt, clear gluya, clear ava is much more matzliach, is much more successful than chinuch that comes from fear. So I want to wish Malitera a huge mazel tov on the 70 years, and a mazel tov, and to continue to accomplish amazing things with all of your talmidim and l'deiris deiris. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you to Mendel. That was excellent. That was like, muat hamachzek esamaruba. There's so much that you said to unpack. And I think, recognizing for ourselves from moving from controlling and instructing students. Sometimes we think of ourselves that a good teacher is a good instructor. I think moving from an instructor to a facilitator. And what we're facilitating, first of all, facilitating to a connection for the child with the Eibishter, which is directly impacted by his ability to have a good connection with us and his parents, which is, very much what you brought out. And the idea of looking, we spoke earlier about the long game, but looking to empower a child instead of just instructing. See, when we instruct, we're staying in the driver's seat and we're teaching the child just about obedience. Obedience. The real goal is to inspire a child so that he's motivated to self-direct, to want to do the right thing. And children have it in them. Our job as facilitators is to facilitate and bring that out of them. And like everything that we're discussing tonight and the topics you picked, but as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of, which letters of Al did the Rebbe talk about this message? So actually, most of the letters to Al were written to donors or to friends, the way it would call friends, donors, shtitzers. But there is one letter of the Rebbe we mentioned earlier written to the ladies' auxiliary, and the last letter that Al got was actually written to Talmidei Yeshivas Al and this was a letter in Tammuz of Tafshin on Aleph, the last letter that we got for right now. And the Rebbe writes over there that the job of Chinuch, and what the Rebbe's hope is that the students will be themselves alive and permeated with the light of Torah and mitzvahs, the way it's explained in the Chassidus. But the Rebbe continues, they should be neighbors lahoyer. They should not just be inspired by themselves, but go out and inspire others, which is very much in light. This is not unique to Torah. This was the mandate of Toim Chitzmimim from the way the Rebbe Rashab designed it, neighbors lahoyer. But the Rebbe continues, and listen to these words: lahoyer svivasam v'eskol olam kuli b'ner mitzvah v'Torah oyer va'ad shetehei shalheves olam eilel. So we can be instructing students that they should do something. We could also instruct them that they should go out on Mivtzayim. But the real goal, what the Rebbe is looking for in our chinuch, is ad shetehei shalheves olam eilel. Inspire a child, facilitate his connection to the Eibishter until the child is himself on fire. The child is shalheves olam eilel. And even more, if you read it, and without making a pilpul out of this, because this is not the context for it, but the Shehei Shalheves Olam Eilel can be read on two ways. It can be read as a mandate for the mechanech to the student, or that the student is so on fire that he can be a neiris lahayr to others, and even impact others, that the others should be Shalheves Olam Eilel, which is Tefeach Hamanas Latfiach, times 3. So this is certainly our mandate, and it takes some adjusting and some design, because sometimes it means letting go in the moment of the control for the longer game of the moment to bring it out, allow the child to take ownership for himself, and children have it in them. They want it. We're not being mechadish something. We're only being megala. We're revealing what the child is made out of, what the connection that the child has, allowing him to discover it, allowing him to live it. So thank you so much for your words. And it is my pleasure to introduce a well-known minal from Kingston, Pennsylvania. Kingston, Pennsylvania, when we're seeing people moving, there was a while people were moving to Florida, and then Florida got too expensive, but Kingston has been like a hotbed for migrating until Kingston just, I don't know, if there's no houses, there's no room in the cheder. But anyways, people are still knocking on the door. A wonderful community, a wonderful cheder. And at the head of that cheder in the Ruchnius is Rabbi Yoel Chazan. Rabbi Yoel, please share with us your voice, your passion, and inspire us tonight.
I think just by way of introduction, it's just very appropriate that Alater is having this. This is the birthday, but it's appropriate that the Shleishim Yom Chen Lachag, Chanukah Yud Shvat, the Indian of Chinuch coming. That's the Friedrich Rebbe's whole Indian. Chinuch to make a Shabbos Rabban. It was Moshe Nefesh. This is what it was Moshe Nefesh for. So I think it's very appropriate. Just allow me, bear with me a few minutes. I want to analyze this in Gemara, which every Lubavitcher really knows. The Gemara towards the beginning of Tainus, where it says Rav Nachman and Rav Yitzchak were sitting together at a Suda, and in the middle of the Suda, Rav Nachman turns to Rav Yitzchak and says, Zagavart, Zagapes, Zagavatera. So Rav Yitzchak answers him and says, No, Ein Masifim B'Shas Suda. You can't speak during the Suda, Shema Yaktim Kana Leveshet, right? In case the Kana will go in front of the Leveshet, then it'll cause a person to choke Chas V'Shalom. So the Gemara continues when the meal was over, the meal finishes, and once again Rav Nachman turns to Yitzchak, Nu, Zagavart. So Yitzchak says, he opens his mouth, he says the famous words that every Lubavitcher knows, Yaakov Avinu lo mes. So right away, Rav Nachman asks him, "Nu, how could you say that?" It says clearly that they were maspid Yaakov Avinu, they embalmed him, they buried him. Right? The Gemara continues, and Rabbi Yitzchak brings down through a limit from the Psukim the famous words, Mazar b'chaim, Afu b'chaim. So Shaila, the Tamask, that first of all, Rav Nachman could have just Rav Yisrael could have just said in the middle of the Suda, he could take just the words of Yaakov and Meis. Instead, he said a much longer thing that we just say the vart, move along. And so Rav Greenglass from Montreal, so he used to often he would send Bachrim to the Rav Yaakov Tolner, the Tolner Rebbe. Al Sakaras Hatayi would send Bachrim to go to his base medrash outside, because when the yeshiva was originally founded in Montreal, he housed the yeshiva was in his base medrash. Al Sakaras Hatayi would send Bachrim. So the Tolner Rebbe, he says like this. He says he asked this Shaila in Gemara, and he answered with a story. Says there was one time in a shtetl in Europe, someone shtetl with Yankel the Melamed. Problem was Yankel Melamed, he couldn't make ends meet. He was poor, and it was very difficult, bitterly difficult for him. Just push it, he couldn't do it. So he decided he's going to go to the big city of Kishinev. He's left his family behind, and there he worked in Mesiras Nefesh day and night, saving penny by penny, sending whatever he could back to his family, and for himself scrimping, majorly. A year passes where he's in Kishinev and he's doing he's teaching, he's Melamed Tanekis, and his wife is starting to get worried. Like, what's going on? What's with her husband? Meanwhile, he himself realizes that it's time to go home. So his wife goes to the Rav of their shtetl and says, "What should I do? My husband's already a year he's gone, and I'm starting to get worried. What should I do?" So the Rav says, "I'll send a letter to the Rav of Kishinev. I'll send to see what's going on with him." So he sends the letter, and they get a letter back that Yankele Mace, and it's already a while he's not here. So she's Mishpacha, they're beside themselves, they mourn, they said Shiva, they raise Kriya. It's terrible. Meanwhile, this Yankel is alive and well, he's on his way, he's making his way back home. He comes home, it's the middle of the night, he doesn't want to disturb his family. So he finds a lodging in a place that he knows is going to be open and it's going to be warm. He goes to the local flour mill. And he sleeps the rest of the night, knowing in the morning he's going to go to his family and he'll see them all. He's really looking forward to it. The pilot comes in the morning. He doesn't realize that by the time the morning comes, he's covered in flour. He's white from head to toe. He comes home. His family have just gotten up from Shiva for him. And you can imagine he walks into the house and says, everybody is going with sugar. He said, "There's a ghost. What's going on with it? And the Neshama is coming back to haunt them." So they call the Chevra Kadisha. The Chevra Kadisha are not afraid of nobody and nothing. Chevra Kadisha come, they schlep him to the Rav. Like they did in those days, they would sit him behind the Mechitza, and the Rav is going to talk to this Neshama. And it didn't take a long time for the Rav to realize that this is no Neshama speaking over here. There's no ghost. This is Yankele Melamed Tanekis. So he says, "What's going on?" We're very confused over it. We got a letter. So he tells his Meshamish, "Bring me the letter. I want to see the letter again." They look at the letter and he realizes that they made a terrible mistake. He writes like this. He says, "Yankel mem dash tough." It's already a while that he's not here. And the Rav is like, "Oy vey." So Rosh Tevis Yankel Melamed Tanekis. It's already a while that he's not here. He realizes the mistake and it's figured out. So the Talmud would say you can have a Melamed, and over here it doesn't just mean Melamed, it means parents, anyone who's tapel with kids, with Yiddish kinder. So you could have one of two things. You could be Yankel Mace, you could be Yankel Melamed Tanekis. Which one's it gonna be? So, and he was explaining it like this. You could read it about these two ways. And that's kind of the point over here. We're all Melamdim Tanekis. Like I said, like whether you're parents, whether you're Melamdim, whether you're in Chinuch, whether you're Pashat Yid living around among children, you're going to be an example somewhere along the way. So the Shaila, every Yid, in the Yiddishkeit, what are we living? Are we alive in the values that we're trying to transmit? Do we have that passion that we're giving over? Are we Yankel, or Chas V'Shalom, are we Yankel Meis, or are we hopefully Yankel Melamed Tanekis? So now this is something that obviously something which our values and what we're passionate about, not what we talk about so much, our values, that's what we're going to have part. So let's go back to the original Gemara that we asked. If you look at the Gemara, now let's take a fresh look at the Gemara. You say over there, Rav Yitzchak said, "Ein masichim b'shas hasuda." He wasn't only speaking about a physical danger that's dangerous to talk when you're eating. What is a suda? A suda is representing bringing down making a dira b'tachtainim of the gashmias. Right, the maisa, doing an action to bring down the Eibishter into this world. In other words, living the Yiddishkeit, not just talking about it. So that's what he's saying. Ein masichin b'shas hasuda. That's not talk. It's not a time for talking, it's a time for doing. And that's what the next line in the Gemara, Shema Yaktim Kana Levations. In case Yaktim, in case we should let our speech come before our action. It's very important that we what our kids see that we do, that's what they listen to. When we're involved in that avodah, we don't begin with words, we begin with action, because that's what's going to stay with our kids, our talmidim, our children. And kids don't need speeches. They need to see living examples. They need to see the living examples of passionate Yiddishkeit, people that live by the values. And that's what it means. Yaakov Avinu lo meis. That was the continuation. If you have Ein Masichem b'shas hasuda, then you have Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Ma'azar b'chaim afu b'chaim. There's a very famous, there's an American saying, children need someone to ignore, and that's what parents were created for. So that's only half true, because children might ignore what they hear their parents say. They can't ignore what they see their parents do. In Staka, I guess I'll just end off with this. There's a very powerful story from one of the Ger Rebbes, the Beis Yisrael. There was a Gvir once came to him and he asked him, he said, Rebbe, I give you a lot of tzedakah. I want to give a bracha. Give me a bracha that my son should become a Talmid Chacham. So he told him, you don't worry, your son is going to give a lot of tzedakah. He says, no, but Rebbe, I want him to become a Talmid Chacham. He says, no, your child is going to give a lot of tzedakah. And again, a third time. He says, but Rebbe, I want him to be a Talmid Chacham. So finally, the Rebbe told him, the Beis Yisrael tells him, if you're going to learn, your child will learn. If you're going to give tzedakah, your child will give tzedakah. So what he sees you doing, that's what he's going to do. And really, this is the foundation of chinuch, of living chinuch, living what we want to give out our children to our children. Right? Our children, they absorb far more of what we do than what we say. Right? So that's the Indian. Our children have to see our passion Yiddishkeit and see what we're passionate about. Then that's what they're going to be passionate about. And I think this is during my time in Alateira, I wasn't there very long, but during my time there, this is something that I see. This is something that you saw across all that Hall in Alateira. It wasn't an Indian. They weren't there as a job. It wasn't. This is one thing they lived with. This is something that was their passion. This was their life, and still is. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, I think this is the secret to the success of Alateira. When you live something, and this is your chayes, this is everything for you. So derech mamela, this is what you give over to your talmidim. This is how values become eternal. This is how you end up having mazar b'chaim afu b'chaim. And I can say, I was in Reb Shalom Chayatana Shir. This is something which we saw. I mean, you see it called Kuli. This is an Indian Rebbe, Segal, who was my Maggid Shir, and all of the Maggid Shirim. And this is the Indian. This is how you have Yaakov Lepoil, Yaakov Avinu lo meis, l'chaim.
L'chaim Rabbi Chazan, Yashikoyach for the Varme Verter. I'll just add, like I've done in the other ones, to bring it out from the words of the Rebbe in one of the letters to Torah. So, in a letter of Tav Shalom at Beis, I mean, the idea of living Yiddishkeit, I mean, Torah's Chaim is in everything. The Rebbe always referred to Torah's Chaim. It's a lebedik Torah. It has to be alive. In a letter of Tav Shalom at Beis, the letter of talking about Sfira Soimer, and Sfira Soimer is each night we're doing a mitzvah. So there's two ways a person can say, listen, the teva of people is we do something for the first time, we're on fire, we're excited, there's a novelty, and that novelty is almost like a stimulant. It stimulates us to be excited about it and passionate about it and alive. But when we do something again and again, sometimes if we aren't training ourselves and we aren't getting the good chinuch, okay, it's like, okay, I did this yesterday, I did it 2 days ago, But in Kedusha, not just are we not supposed to lose the chayis, but the Rebbe would often underline the importance of Mailam B'Kodesh. So to put it in the words of the Rebbe says, even though we did this mitzvah the day before, we have to be adding. And the Rebbe puts these words, I'm going to read one little line in Yiddish and one in English. It has to be novel. Jeden Tag darf Yid sein aufnehmen, wie sie seinen Ernst gegeben geworden bei Berg Sinai. We have to be excited and to do it with a chayis, as if it was given as if today was the first time I received the Torah by Har Sinai. And the Rebbe then says like this, in other words, which the Rebbe doesn't always write, and sometimes the Rebbe says this point, but over here the Rebbe wants to bring it out. In other words, the observance of mitzvahs in a daily life, day after day, should not be allowed to become a matter of mere habit or routine, tending to diminish in vitality and inspiration. On the contrary, this should be an ever-deepening experience, every day on a higher level, in accordance to the principles or matters of holiness should be on ascendancy. We go higher and stronger. And this is not just a suggestion, this is the only way. Because when we're on fire, we're proud who we are, people are attracted to life. When a person, recently I heard from a parent who shared that the most touching thing they heard by an open house was when the Rebbe, it's here in Al-Taira, but I'm sure every Rebbe feels this way. The Rebbe shared, I am here in Chinuch not as a second choice. It is my first choice. I'm excited to be here. I chose to go into this field, not because I couldn't do something else, but because I chose to get involved in the most important, impactful, and lifelong effort. So when we're on fire, the children are attracted to it, they take it in, and they become Tefeach Hamanas Latfiach. With that, it is my honor to introduce Rabbi Volshansky. Rabbi Volshansky is a highly acclaimed principal in the Cheder of Morristown, a graduate of Al-Taira. Rabbi Volshansky, without further ado.
Yeshakayach Rabbi Blau. Good evening. Mazel Tov to Al-Taira, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few words in honor of this special milestone. We are standing just a few weeks before Yud Shvat, a time when every chassid is preparing himself by learning the Maimer of Basi Lagani. One of the central themes of this Maimer, and indeed the very ikr, shlichus, and part of the process of bringing Mashiach, is the avodah of making Yedira B'Tachtonim, to draw down the Shechina, Hashem's presence in this world. B'Hashgacha Pratis, this year we are also marking 50 years since Shnas HaChinuch, when the Rebbe introduced the 12 Psukim and Maimori Chazal. Amongst them are two selections from Perek Lamed Gimel of Tanya, which speak directly to this very idea of Dira B'Tachtonim. So how is this accomplished? How do we actually make a Dira B'Tachtonim in this world? The Maimer goes on to explain that this is exactly what Moshe was commanded to do with the words V'asel li mikdash v'shechanti b'seichem. When the Eibishter told him, make for me a mikdash v'shechanti b'seichem, it was through this avodah in the Mishkan and later in the mikdash that the Shechina was drawn down lamata into this physical world. As Chazal explained, brought by the Alshich, L'Kutei Torah, and the Maimarim of Basi Lagani, v'shechanti b'seichem b'seichai leinemar ela b'seichem b'seich kolechad v'yachad mi'Yisrael. The Torah doesn't say within it, the Lashon Yachid, but rather within them, which means within each and every Yid. And this teaches us that this avodah, this action of making a Dira B'Tachtonim, begins with each and every one of us. Every person must make a mikdash ma'at within himself, and from there, extend it outward into the world. The key word here is action. Hamaisa hu ha'ikr. And what is the ultimate maisa? The Iker HaMaisa, Hashem says, make for me a mikdash. Make a dwelling place for me. Lasis lo yizbarech dira b'tachtonim. Of course, there are many ways the Torah tells us on how to build this mikdash. But based on the words of Chazal, loy hamed v'shikar ela hamaisa, and in the spirit of this Farbrengen on Chinuch, I want to take the next few minutes to focus specifically on this idea, hamaisa hu ha'ikar, and how it applies to Chinuch. In a sikha delivered on Yud Shvat Tashrim and Days, the Rebbe spoke about this principle, hamaisa hu ha'ikar, that action is the main thing. The Rebbe explains that with all mitzvahs, the most essential element is the performance of the mitzvah. It's true that if a person did a mitzvah or davened without kavanah, it's like a guf without a neshama, a body without a soul. Nevertheless, no matter how deep a person's kavanah, intention, or spiritual feelings may be, if the actual deed is missing, the mitzvah has not been fulfilled. However, when a person performs the mitzvah in action, the mitzvah is fulfilled, even if the level of kavanah is incomplete. And the Rebbe added that this approach itself leads to further growth. In line with the teaching mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, that one mitzvah leads to another, through consistent action, a person will eventually develop a deeper understanding and connection to the meaning and the intent behind the mitzvah. Similarly, we find in Sefer HaChinuch, there's a phrase, Achre apulos nimshachim halavavis, or Achre hamaisim nimshachim halavavis, which is a central principle in Yiddishkeit, that when a person is involved in action, external action, it can shape a person's inner feelings and thoughts. If a person commits to positive actions, even if it's initially without obligation, he's eventually going to become emotionally connected and possibly even experience inner change because the heart is drawn after action. In other words, the most important thing is action. And through consistent action, it will eventually affect and change other areas as well. So with all the many ideas in Chinuch and the very important skills and tools that exist in educating our children, it is essential not to get caught up in theory alone or to lose sight of the goal, but to remain focused on action. Of course, ideas and skills, you can't ignore them. They are tools that we need. And very often it's the Talmud, the learning itself, that leads to the action. But nevertheless, action remains the most important for you and your child. As we mentioned earlier in the Sikha, that Hamaisu Ha'ikar, mitzvah gereres mitzvah, that one mitzvah leads to another, I think we can also say that when we, as parents, perform a mitzvah, it will naturally lead to our children doing a mitzvah as well. So we already know that action speaks louder than words, and that children learn so much more from what we do than what we say. So if your child sees you davening with a minyan, and he sees that minyan is important to you, and that you have a kviyasitim latera, he'll want to follow your example. If your child sees how careful you are with halacha, he'll be careful as well. If your child sees that you're excited about a yom de pagra or maybe a sikha that you just learned, he will share that excitement. When you do things with simcha and passion, he will too. Your child will do what you do and because you do. Action matters. And action is the main thing. There's a story about the famous Lubavitcher journalist Rav Gershon Jacobson when he was once by the Rebbe. So during the conversation, the Rebbe asked him with a smile whether he wants to conduct an interview. So Rav Gershon asked if he can ask any question. And the Rebbe replied, of course. That is the nature of an uncensored interview. So amongst the questions he asked was the following. People wonder why the Rebbe takes on causes that others ignore. Sometimes They're even seemingly impossible situations. And the Rebbe answered by pointing to one of the first leadership moments in Torah, which is quoted actually in this week's parsha. The pasuk says, "Vayhi b'yamim mehem Moshe, vayigdal Moshe v'yitzei elechav, vayar b'sivleisam." He saw their suffering, and then he saw vayar ish mitzri, make ish ivri meyachav. Vayifen koi v'choi, he looked here and there, vayar ki ish, vayaches mitzri v'itmnei b'chel. So they ever wondered, why did Moshe look around, and only when he saw that there was no one there, did he strike the mitzri? It's a time of crisis. Was Moshe so concerned about his own well-being? And if so, why do we have to know about this detail? The fact that despite Moshe's caution, two people actually saw, they witnessed the act, and later informed on him. Clearly the pasuk is teaching us a different message. So that I've explained that this does not mean that Moshe was checking for his own safety. Moshe saw that there was no one else willing to take responsibility. No one else stepped forward to care. So he took action. Al derech hatzachis, maybe you can say, later in the parsha it says, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Eibishter, Loi ish dvarim anochi. I'm not a man of words. Moshe Rabbeinu was a man of action. If I can throw in a plug for All Torah, they're now running a campaign, and it's called Tachlis. So I once heard, Tachlis, which actually means purpose, can also remind us, Tachlis, talk less. So Tachlis, talk less and do more. So dear parents and fellow colleagues in Chinuch, the Torah is teaching us a powerful and foundational lesson in Chinuch. We must lead by action. Moshe Rabbeinu was a man of action. The Rebbe embodied the same spirit. From the Rebbe's words immediately following the first Maimer to the many campaigns launched over the years of the Nesius, the emphasis was always action. They taught us that it's not words alone that matter, but it's action. And this is a profound lesson in Chinuch, one that speaks directly to our role in children's Chinuch education. So as educators, when we notice gaps in learning and values, attention or guidance, we cannot assume that someone else will address them. As parents, we are children's first and most influential educators. Whether it means becoming more involved in learning at home, setting strong personal examples, or reinforcing values on a daily basis, parental action makes a difference. These actions leave a lasting impression and have the greatest impact. So when it comes to our children's chinuch, the message is clear. Ha-maisa hu ha'ikar. Speaking about maisa, action in the truest sense, this includes, of course, halacha l'maisa and halachas hatzrichis that the Rebbe encouraged everyone to learn and to be fluent in. It's especially true since our children are constantly watching what we do. And so it's essential that we model and convey the right message through our actions, including our conduct in halacha. I would be remiss if I did not mention the following final thought. When I was in Shir Gimel in the Sifta Halei Torah, Rabbi Zusha Willem Olav Shalom began a Mivtza Halacha to learn through the entire Chelek Aleph of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch over the course of about 10 months. It was a serious undertaking that demanded real dedication and consistency. I sat together with his son Levi, and we worked our way through each siman step by step. And of course, in classic Rabbi Willem style, he went all the way. At the conclusion, we had this grand farher, and we each received a beautiful full set of the Torah Shulchan Aruch. Through this, Rabbi Willem taught us the importance of learning halacha and instilled in each of us a true kach in limud halacha l'maisa. To this day, I am deeply indebted to Rabbi Willem Olav Shalom for giving me the drive to learn through the entire Chelek Aleph and for fostering in me a lasting enjoyment of learning halacha that continues until today. And honestly, when I think about why I became excited about learning halacha, it was probably because I saw how excited he was. about learning in general, and about halacha in particular. Rabbi Willem led by example, Rabbi Willem led by action. May we be zeichet to fulfill our shlichus of creating a dira batachtenim in our own home, within our children, by drawing down and revealing the getliche power each of our children possess, enabling them to accomplish and fulfill their unique shlichus, which will lead Be'ezras Hashem to the ultimate dira batachtenim with the coming of Mashiach now.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Volshansky. That was incredible. That was incredible. Hamaisa Huiker is all over in the Rebbe's Torah. Someone once told me, but I can't vouch for its accuracy, that it is the most often repeated phrase that the Rebbe would use in the Sichos Hamaisa Huiker. The Rebbe was all about action, and the Rebbe wanted us to be action-oriented. We're driven not just by shiny ideas and big values, but bring those ideas into action. So many letters, so many sichos specifically talk about it. In a letter of Olatayra and Tavshim Em Gimel, the Rebbe says the following. The Rebbe reinstates what are those high values of Olatayra and of every Meisid of Lubavitch to instill Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. But here's the interesting part. A lot of times we don't know, what does that mean? In other words, is that by Achsidische Fabrengen? How do we instill Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem? So let me read this paragraph. This is also the foundation of the Torah Chinuch, which Al Torah implants in its students. In addition to the students themselves being permeated with the spirit of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, the love of God and the fear of God, with an emphasis on action underlined. Namely, the Rebbe gives this itself. You see, you can't even talk about action without having a call to action. So the Rebbe says, namely, what does it mean with an emphasis on action? The actual fulfillment of mitzvahs with Hider. Every Yid is Mikayim mitzvahs. But the Rebbe wanted an extra Hamaisa Hua'ikar. When we realize how important action is, we don't just do the action, but mitzvahs behider, which is something the Rebbe demanded a lot from us as Chassidim. Our Chassid goes l'fnei Meshuras Hadin. When it comes to matzahs, we're not just looking for kosher matzahs, we're looking for matzahs which are muhudarim. When it comes to a lulav and esrik, we're not just looking for a kosher one, we're looking for a muhudadik one. Tefillin and mezuzahs, muhudar. But the truth is, it's not just about these big mitzvahs that happen a couple of times in a year or a few times in our lifetime. It's each mitzvah for us to look, what's the call to action? How can I do this mitzvah with more hider? With more hider. So, and I'll also mention the letter of the Rebbe in Tavshim Em Ches, which was a year of Hakel. So the Rebbe says, Hamaisa Ikar. It's all about Maisa, and the Rebbe gives a role for everyone to play in how they can strengthen the chinuch of themselves, chinuch of Al Torah. Zu verstärken der Meiset begashmius u beruchnius gam yochad. Jedere in sein und ihr Gebiet. And here's the Rebbe said, because it was a year of Hakel, so while some letters is a call to the shtitzers of Al Torah, or the way the Rebbe would sometimes call them the Torah shtitzer, the people are Torah supporters, the Rebbe in this letter doesn't just call action to those people, the action to give. But over here the Rebbe goes ahead and articulates, Ha-noshim, the balabatim, the Torah shtitzers, but it's not just the Gashmias that has to be strengthened, it's the Ruchnias that has to be strengthened. Zusammen mit der Anhala und Eltern, Ishu Beisai. The Rebbe says, when I'm referring to parents as a union, the husband and the wife. Va'anoshim im habonim on hakeres habayis, perhaps specifically the Yiddish mothers. Va'ataf, and the Rebbe addresses the Talmidim. The Talmidim Itzdike, and here's a very rare lashon in Tavshim Em Ches, which is the last Shnas Hakel that we have from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, I am talking to the current students, und die Zukunftige, the ones that will come, the ones that are going to learn in Al Torah in the future. I'm talking to them, Hamaiso Iker, to strengthen ourselves and to strengthen the people around us. We are now going to we have 7 voices of Chinuch. Doir Hashvi, the Rebbe taught us, Kol Hashvi and Chavivin. Kol Hashvi and Chavivin. So for the 7th voice, we turn to Reb Chaim Yisrael Willem. Reb Chaim Yisrael is Brakara Davua, an incredible inspiration to many people. You mentioned Rabbi Volshansky about the Miftzah of Halacha. Reb Chaim Yisrael has brought a chayis, a living example of a chassid that's on fire, Teifeach Hamanas Latfiach, inspiring the students to be Shalheves Olam Eila. And Reb Chaim Yisrael is going to bring it all together. What's the tachlis? What is all chinuch about? What's the tachlis of chinuch? Reb Chaim Yisrael, Bechavid Hachi Gadol.
Yasher Koyach, Mazel Tov to all the Torah, for all the Talmidim, all the Machanchim, and I thank you very much for giving the opportunity of sharing L'chaim Chassidim. 70 is a shleimus. 70 represents a completion in all 7 midos, and that's Doir Hashvi, complete. We're learning the Maimer Basi Lagani. We're learning now Bazet Tovimi Tanu Doir Hashvi. This is what we demand, that even if you were born in this generation, not lo yukifir tzayneinu, lo alpi bechira seinu, but because you're in this generation, this is the generation that's going to bring Mashiach, and it's going to complete all the inyanim as Doir Hashvi, all the way going back from Doir Harishayin to Doir Hashvi, and we know that this is going to be it. So for the Rebbe to make this Yasas a Timkit Tmimim, and Yutes Tevis, it started off Baruch Hashem Tavshin Tezayin, and now we're 70 years complete. It's not a chiddush that Mashiach is going to come already right now. Yutes Tevis Tavshin Peivav. They're going to be the Gula Mitzvah Shlema now that we have completing of 70 years, and we're going to connect this to our Bacharim, our Talmidim, and for all parents and all Mechanchim that are online to hear what we could do to get our children, our Mechonachim, our Talmidim, to go and to Gizach Cook of Mashiach. There's a Sikha of the Rebbe in Sichos Torah, where the Rebbe says that when you look at a child, Vaz Etmen, what do you see? You see Mashiach. This is Mashiach. Atiga b'Mashiachoi, Elo Tinoika Shal Beis Rabbim. As we get not a cook, you see, and you look, what are you seeing? You see a kid, you see Mashiach. And what's the pshat? Because the whole lineage, and the Rebbe speaks about the whole lineage of Sichos Torah is Atar Eis Ladas, so you see Gilei Lukus. And that's why it's specially connected, this whole lineage of Gilei Lukus, with children dancing. And you see right away this whole lineage, the Gilei Lukus, and you see when is the Gilei Lukus going to be revealed finally, and that's going to be by the Zman of Mashiach. And in this Simchas Torah, Sicha Tavshin and Beis, in our last Sicha Leisata, we heard Simchas Torah from the Rebbe speaks about that this is very special. Our generation are more Mashiach, is more visible. You could see it by them, and that's why they're called Sivas Hashem, and all the children that are here. And it's important that all of us have that koch and looking and giving them their focus of Inyanim Mashiach. The Rebbe on Sichos Torah says all the Machanchim of the children should join in a song that the Tzivos Hashem children start. It's a march that they go on their own, and like this, it's going to pick up the whole union of Mashiach by these children. So, speaking about Mashiach and connecting it to our Talmidim, what could we do? I begin a story. My father, Reb Zushal of Shalom's older brothers, was eingezogen to Reb Moshe Wilhelm, living in Portland, Oregon, the Shlich of the Rebbe, where he shared the story with me again today, telling me the story as follows. By his bar mitzvah, he grew up in Al Torah. Now, his bar mitzvah, my father and his older brother were one of the first Talmidim, one from the first classes, I think it was the 4th class, in the 4th classes of Al Torah. And when it was time for bar mitzvah, a lot of children left Al Torah system and they were going to learn English studies. And while they were learning, or they went to at least English classes after hours. So my Zayda Avram David was asked by his people, he worked in Queens. People asked him, "Was wird sein mit deinem Bacher und mit deinem Tachshit? If nicht lernen kein English, he's not going to learn any English." So he said, "Ich gave from Rebbe for the bar mitzvah. I'm going to ask the Rebbe." Comes the bar mitzvah, and by the yichidus of the bar mitzvah, so my Zayda went in to get the bar mitzvah bacher. and asked the Rebbe, was soll man tun wegen English, bis heard the Bach gelernt in all Torah. Man in English, what should we do? And the Rebbe sometimes said, until 9 years old, until 12 years old, till Bar Mitzvah, yet till Bar Mitzvah, was soll sein? And the Rebbe responded, and the Rebbe says, Mashiach kum schon bald, was darf man das? Twice. Mashiach kum schon bald, was darf man learn in English? Why do you need it? And that was the words I heard today when I was repeating. So, having that nekuda, that the Bachirim have a koch and a shturim and chayis and Mashiach. I believe, and we all know, that we could see that the world is getting ready for Mashiach. The very fact that all the Torah is producing Rave of the Shluchim was gain and Welt, you're giving and going all over, and there's there's a corner in the world that is not ready, and we're preparing the world for Mashiach. Was pshat? Where does it come from? How does it come that all of a sudden that happens? That's because as the Mechinach Geret, when we make sure that they're in yeshiva, it's in Yonim of Mashiach, Yonim Gula, and we'll be connected to it. And that's and clearly there's something special with the Rebbe's yeshiva that we're pushing, we're getting through. There's a very strong koch in yeshiva about Mashiach. If it's after davening, if it's Yichiyad Masai, if it's after every single tefillah. And I remember as a student, till today, the Bachim is a special koch. Something special in Bayas in yeshiva, which I'm sure by many yeshivas, is that the Bachirim on their own make the Mashiach shir. I was thinking about it, Grade. Of course, we have sometimes the opportunity of in Yanagula also mitzad a seder in the class, but there's also this special in Mashiach shir dafke from the Talmidim. And what it really it picks up, it's like a sata. And I remember Rabbi Ari Lashansky mentioned earlier, my father was Shalom. There was some time that when he gave a shir and he gave a shir. It was very special. But when he gave in Yom Mashiach shir, which is usually during the break, it usually would go and stop. You have to go until Seder. But his shurim, I remember speaking about the Shir Abad and the Lev Yassim and Al Zachan, and it was just getting more exciting and more exciting and more deep and more geschmack. So the Yom Mashiach and Yom Gola is that I could say that I was looking up a little bit what states. Our Moisid is called Moisid Chinuch Al Taharas HaKodesh Al Torah. Al Taharas HaKodesh, on the purity of holiness. And there's the Braiser of Pinchas Ben Yair. Tahara Mevil de Precious. The Precious Mevil de Nova. A whole bring to Chassidus. And Chassidus brings the Kedusha, and it goes on and on to Ruach HaKodesh and to the Yom of Mashiach. And I was thinking to myself, Al Taharas HaKodesh. Al Taharas HaKodesh. So I know that many of us, we're teaching Kodesh, and there's a special koch in Yom Golem Mashiach. And how do we bring this home to ourselves? I think the Rebbe gave us the glasses, and this is for all of us that are here. It's those that are teaching in Ola Torah, learning in Ola Torah, students in Ola Torah Talmidim. That when we put on glasses and we put the Rebbe's brilliant, and the Rebbe, when it came different Yanim, when it came to Nun and Aleph, and many of us remember those days. As all of a sudden the Rebbe says, this is Yanim of Mashiach. If this thing happened, or that thing happened, or this war, and the Rebbe says, Kukais, if you look at it, and you look at it in those words, especially if you learn it through the Dvar Malchus, Nun Aleph, and Beis, so you see this Koch in Yanim Golem Mashiach. So ich will sagen that as I was behind the Shiv Mishana, we're asking the Rebbeinu Shalom that Admasai, we all said. We said Admasai so many times, and the Rebbe said our generation is the last generation of the Gullahs and the first generation of the Gula. We could clearly say what the Rebbe said by the Kinas HaShluchim, that we're here, we're Mechanech the Kinalach, and we want to continue, but our one thing is we want to bring in and usher in Mashiach and like the Rebbe will be able to see, like the Mechol once said, that we're going to show Mashiach and Rugiduim Shegidalno. This is going to be the Mashiach, the Kinalach of Mashiach, and I believe strongly that if any of us, we live Mashiach, and clearly what Rabbi Lashansky was mentioning earlier, and the way we live, they're going to follow us as parents. We're going to have that koch, have that chayis, have that glasses. So what's happening is, it's going to be in Yonam Mashiach, it's going to be in Yonam Geula, it's going to be that inyan of Taharas HaKodesh. And take it from me on Mamash, which is Shturim, is Harangain in the base of Mikdash Shlishi. This campaign will finish way into the Gula Mitzvah Shlema that's going to take place. But Be'ez Hashem is Barach Haint. Take it from me on Mamash, L'chaim. Shekoyach.
Thank you, Rabbi Willem. Amazing words and an incredible way to finish an inspiring night on so many levels. The Rebbe was all about, from the first mimer. In other words, when you see the Rebbe, the consistency and the chut that goes from the very first mimer to the last mimer, everything about Doir Hashvi was lahavi li'maisa Mashiach, that it should be not just from an idea, but tachlis maisa hamaisa ha'ikar, to bring Mashiach from an idea to a reality, to bring Geula to a Geula Pratis, and from a Geula Pratis to a Geula Klalis. In the last letter that we received from the Rebbe, der Weile while we're in Galus, the Rebbe finishes off where he benches the Talmidim, and he says, "V'tikuyim b'chol echad me'atalmidim ha'mesayimim sheyichyu b'seichei klal Yisrael. Tfilas u'birchas Moshe Rabbeinu. Everyone should experience Moshe Rabbeinu's brachas, which when Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Nasi Ader gives us a bracha, that bracha is also an esinas koyach, and the Rebbe used in Tafshin and Aleph, this is the capital of Tzaddik, V'inoyam Hashem Alekeinu Aleinu, U'maisi Yadeinu Koinu Aleinu, where Moshe Rabbeinu benches the Yidin, Yehi Ratzain, Shetishre Shechina B'maisi Yadeichem. We're doing a lot of action, but it's all about bringing the Shechina down. And Yehi Ratzain, that Shetishre Shechina B'maisi Yadeichem, that the Shechina should dwell and should find existence and expression in all of the actions that we're doing. And the Rebbe then takes the part of the pasuk of Maisi Yadeinu Koineneu, what we're doing, Maisi Yadeinu Koineneu, the Rebbe adds Bebeis HaMikdash HaShlishi, Sheibane B'meira V'yameinu, in the third Beis HaMikdash, which should be rebuilt speedily in our days, B'geula HaMitzvah HaShlema Ayidei Mashiach Tzidkenu, take it from Miyad Mamish, or B'lashon HaRambam. The Rebbe says this idea that Geula happens expeditiously, the Rambam uses the lashon in Ochos Tshuva, miyad hein nigalim. Immediately, Yidin can be redeemed without any delay. And the Rebbe concludes, bebracha hatzlacha bechol hanal. So it is my schus to really thank everyone who joined us tonight over Zoom, over YouTube, over the website where it was embedded. And thank you so much. I hope that you found all the voices inspiring, and I hope that some of the voices resonated with you deeply in a way that you can bring this to strengthen your chinuch, in your home, in your classroom, your interactions, your intentionality, and your commitment to the Rebbe's vision of chinuch al Taharas HaKodesh. We're in the middle of a campaign to shore up, to strengthen the Moisid, Beruchnius, which is a campaign of every single day. But once a year is where we make a public campaign to shore up the Moisid Begashmias. And this year, in the Shivim Shana, the theme of the campaign is Tachlis and the Schus to take part in Al Torah, Shivim Shekel B'Shekel HaKodesh, supporting Al Torah with a shekel. And the shekel is Shekel HaKodesh, supporting Chinuch Al Taharas HaKodesh, is a tremendous Schus. In every letter of the Rebbe, or I should say in almost every letter of the Rebbe promises the supporters of Al Torah that the Eibishter will give them back Mida Keneged Mida. And when a supporter goes L'chatchila Riber in his support for Al Torah, the Rebbe promises them that they will experience L'chatchila Riber in their own life and will go from good to better. So tonight we have the schus to partner with Al Torah and to help shore up the Moisid as we celebrate the Meishnei Seinu Bem Shivim Shana. We march forward with strength in Bigvurei Shmeinim Shana with a renewed commitment, but not just a renewed commitment, a commitment that's going to be Be'in Aroich to everything that happened until now, like is well known to everyone what the Mispar Shmeina reflects. We go to the Bigvurei Shmeinim Shana, we are entering our 8th decade, a decade of growth, a decade of commitment, a decade of bringing the Shechina Lamata B'Tachtoinim, L'chaim, and it should be a Yom Holedes, a Shnas Bracha V'Atzlacha for everyone in everything that they need. Banei Chayim Zayna U'Bekulam Revichi.